Hey guys, tonight author Mark Leslie joins me for a rousing discussion about haunted libraries and haunted bookstores. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How is everybody? Getting closer to Christmas. Got that countdown going. This is like your own little private advent calendar every night. What we got, like 5-6 days now, right? The crowds. Oh, the crowds. As the Grinch would say. If I was the Grinch. I'm not the Grinch, so. Anyway, welcome. My name is Charlotte. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. I'll be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state of California, which means, drum roll please, we can get to you no matter where you're at. It may take us an hour or two, but we'll get to you. So look us up on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. I should stop and remember this. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and Instagram. You can find us. In fact, on Instagram, we are under my name, my pseudonym, which is Ghosty Gal, all lowercase. That's Ghosty Gal. Twitter, we are Cal Haunts. And over on TikTok, we're California Haunts, and it's all lowercase. So, yeah. And then, of course, on Facebook, we are California Haunts. You can check us out there. Which reminds me, if you're watching tonight and you like what you see in here, please be sure to like and follow the page or the pages that you're watching from here on Facebook. And if you're watching from Twitter, there's a little ghost in the bottom right-hand corner. God, I'm getting really good at that, pointing that guy out. There's a little ghost. It's going to be one of those nights. I can just tell. So far, yeah, the computer's been really bad. Okay, yeah, right there in that bottom right-hand corner, you click on that. That's our ghostly guy. And the little subscribe thing will come up. And subscribe to our shows. We've got over 450 shows sitting over there. And they're all different topics. I don't just cover paranormal topics. So I think there's a little something over there for everybody. Now, if things could stop going wrong and I stop pushing the wrong buttons, life would be great, right? So anyway, welcome tonight. We've got a great show for you. When I was working as a working journalist, I worked in a smaller town called Placerville up in the Gold Country, just about 40, 45 miles from where I'm at right now. And all of Main Street in Placerville had ghostly activity, all the buildings, especially the bookstore. There was a particular bookstore that constantly had activity. And the funny thing is, the stories go for this bookstore is that the people that worked in there, and this is like, they've had like successive owners, okay? So it's not just one bunch of owners that walked into this bookstore and said, oh yeah, there's something going on. This is successive owners, like 4 or 5 owners in a row that say there's activity in this bookstore. And I know one of the stories that was circulating in this bookstore that was really prominent was that it used to be at one time, I think it used to be like a tea room back in the 1800s. California doesn't go back as far as like Maine and places like that. I mean, we're still fairly young on that scale of history. And so the report is that people would go in to open up the door, in the morning to open the bookstore. And they would hear people talking in there, and they could hear the jingling of like teacups and stuff like that when they walked in. So that's kind of cool, And then there was also a report, because Placerville is known as Old Hangtown. And that's for obvious reasons why it was an Old Hangtown, because there was frontier justice up there. And so they used to say that the hangman used to come in there and visit, because there was a report that there was a saloon in behind this place. And I remember we went in there, and during our investigation, they had some barrels in the back and stuff. We were getting like sounds from that too, like saloon type sounds, because it happens to be right next to the main hotel in town. So the ghosts are coming back and forth and things like that. But anyway, my guest tonight, Mark Leslie, has written a book on haunted libraries and haunted bookstores. And I'm just curious, to talk to him to find out more details about this. Why do ghosts hang out in libraries? Why do ghosts hang out in bookstores? Is it because some of these bookstores are selling used books, possibly that somebody owned? Because I read, on my Sunday reading, there was a story about a bookstore and about a ghost that was coming back regularly every Sunday. and the people in this bookstore would see this ghost, and it turns out it was because of a particular book. And then once they acknowledged that this ghost was coming back for this particular book, it was never seen again. So I'm just curious about that. Anyway, I'm going to shut up, bring him in. He can tell you about himself, and he's written stuff about Haunted Hospital. That's one of the TV shows I watch. I don't watch a lot of ghost shows. I watch Haunted Hospitals. I watch Paranormal 911. And those are the kind I watch. So I'm curious about that as well. But let's bring him in and talk to him and see what's happening. Okay. All right. Here we go. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. How's it going?
Good. That was quite the long-winded intro. I'm sorry.
That's all good. It's all good.
Tell me about you, sir.
Well, I've been fascinated by paranormal stuff and ghosts my entire life. You could probably say I am the world's biggest chicken. I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared of the things that go bump in the dark in the night. And I guess as I grew older, I always wrote, and I wrote a lot of horror and scary fiction and stuff like that. But I was in Ottawa, Ontario, probably in the early 90s. And I went on a ghost walk, historic ghost walk. And Ottawa is the nation's capital. And it's the person in the Victorian garb, and they've got the cloak and the old lantern, and they set the scene and they tell the story. And it's this really beautiful historic, building of the Rideau Canal, and the very first murder that took place on Spark Street with one of the members of Parliament, and a hanging, and then the haunted jail, and all of these really fascinating stories. So one thing I was never good at in school was history, but I learned to love history through the ghost stories, and it's fascinating because you can't often tell a really good ghost story without digging into the history, like where's the ghost from and what explains these things. And so I moved from Ottawa to Hamilton, Ontario. Now, Hamilton might be considered the steel town of Canada, kind of like Pittsburgh, very similar. All of the mining stuff from where I grew up in mid-northern Ontario gets sent down to Hamilton, Ontario, where there are two different steel mills that manufacture stuff. And I went on the ghost walks there, and that kind of led to I met with the haunted Hamilton people, and I thought, wow, this is fascinating, because I got to learn about my new adopted city by going on the ghost walks and learning a whole bunch of things, like the War of 1812 and a whole bunch of other historical things related to Canada, or the history of Canada. And I asked them, I said, hey, you guys have some great stories. Have you ever thought about, because I've been a bookseller my whole life. Have you ever thought about writing a book? I think that would sell really well. And they said, well, we're too busy, but we'll give you access to our notes and all of our research if you want. And so I pitched to Canada's largest publisher, Dundurn, a book about ghost stories about Hamilton. And lo and behold, they said, sure. They said, if you can get it to us, and this was like in the early summer, if you can get it to us, in the next 3 weeks, we'll put it in the fall catalog, which is kind of rare for traditional publishing. It's usually, a year or two later. So I hadn't written the book, so I had to take a week off work, dig into the research, and get that first draft to them right away, because I didn't want to miss the opportunity. And that led to a number of books about haunted locations. And of course, the one you were talking about, Tomes of Terror, Haunted Bookstores and Libraries, is my real passion, because I have been a book nerd my entire life, an absolute diehard book nerd. And I think the best places in the world are, the quote, a room without books is like a body without a soul. And so, and that's, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Philosopher, I'll come up with his name later, but it'll come. And anyway, so that was when I did this book. That was a real passion project for me. I was so eager to write about bookstores and libraries and the scary things that may happen in those places if they happen to be haunted.
Absolutely. You and I have a lot in common. I've been ghost hunting for almost 20 years. I've been afraid of the dark all my life. I sleep. I have a light on constantly here. You know what I mean?
And you go on ghost walks, though. Like, you actually go ghost hunting. right?
Yeah.
You're brave enough to do that. I talk to people like you to write my stories.
So I'm afraid of the dark. Bumps in the night, not for me. I'm okay ghost hunting because I'm always with a psychic. See, I always make sure that people always say, "Why do you hang with the psychic?" Because they can see things I can't. So I'm good.
Yeah.
Or if I'm behind the camera filming, with the infrared, I can see everything that's going on. I'm good. But
Yeah.
if I have to sit there in the dark by myself or something, I can't do
Not
that.
going to happen.
Not
No,
going to
no.
happen in my life. Just not going to happen. So why do you think ghosts like to hang out in libraries and bookstores?
So one of the things when you think about a bookstore, you think about a life. Think about what a book does. What is a book other than the infinite possibilities of the world? Like, you open a book, you open a mind. You open a book, you can bring people into all kinds of places. They can learn, they can be inspired, they can be entertained, they can be taken away. I mean, that there's so many things that a book can bring. So if you were to think of a location that is most likely to attract a spirit
Mm-hmm.
that is trapped and lingered and can't maybe escape this mortal plane, think about where would be a location that would be so rich with wonder and awe and power
Mm-hmm.
that it may be natural for a spirit to find itself attracted to a place like this. Because when people go into a bookstore, their emotions, I mean, again, if they're a book nerd like me,
Right.
they're excited, they're thrilled. There's the possibility, the sense of possibility is just waiting to be discovered. And that, I believe, ghosts are often associated. So it depends on what you believe. If you believe that ghosts are the spirits of the departed, that's one theory. But the other one is, are ghosts actually generated from a power based on high emotion, high energy, and something that really, like trauma, joy, any of those really, really high emotions? So you think a bookstore's got to be rife for, or a library, rife for those possibilities. And again, we all know, the classic scene in Ghostbusters that opens it up. Right, there's that classic scene of the haunted New York Public Library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I always think too, like the way you're describing books and stuff for the people that are into books, it's kind of like nowadays with these younger kids in the internet.
Yeah,
That's where they're getting their info. They get up first thing in the morning. Hey, I need to find out about this. Google, and all this. And that's what we did. Only we went to the library and we were in the encyclopedias. We were doing, all these other searches.
yeah,
I love books. I am a book fiend. I just love. I can't get enough books. In fact, my friend that passed away ended up giving me all her paranormal books. I have a whole library of paranormal books now that I still have to read through.
Oh
With
wow,
different hauntings
wow.
and stuff. But yeah, this has fascinated me. And when I heard you on the other show, I just thought it was terrific. To
Oh,
hear
thank you.
somebody talk
Yeah.
about this, because I have come in fact, we have a haunted library here in town that I've never done. We haven't investigated yet. We're working on getting in there. But like I said, being up in Placerville, I was around that. I was around the antiques. I was around, the bookstores and stuff like that.
Right.
Do you think that that there could be attachments to these books, like with that story I told in the beginning, where this gentleman was attached to this book? It was a family heirloom book, and he kept coming back
Yeah,
to see it. And when they would come in, they wouldn't see him. They'd see the book floating in the air, and then the book would hit the ground.
yeah, yeah. I think a ghost could be attached to a book.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually one of the stories that I was researching for Four Tomes of Terror was actually near Barrie, Ontario, and I'm in Ontario, Canada.
Sure.
And so I'm in the Eastern time zone,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I know you're in the Pacific
Yeah.
time zone. And this was, I think it was Rivendell Books. I think it was named. It was a used bookstore, and there was a gentleman who went in and bought a historic book. I think it was a World War II book, and he brought it back home, and he brought a guest, unexpected guest that was attached to that book because he had it on the nightstand. He woke up in the middle of the night and he saw this man standing by the end of the bed, the same side of the bed that the nightstand with the book
Mm-hmm.
on it was, and he kept seeing the man there in his room, and he actually brought a priest in, and the priest actually did some did some work and basically determined, like, do I need to exercise this house? And he said, no, this person is attached to the book. If you bring the book back to the bookstore, the man will go with it. And lo and behold, he brought the book back to the bookstore and never saw the man standing beside his bed again. So what was it that attacked? Like, was it? Did the man die and his family sort of just donated all his books or sold them to a used bookstore, and that was maybe a prized possession, or what was it that attracted him
Mm-hmm.
to that book? I mean, we all have favorite books, right? Especially for book lovers, there's certain editions, right? I have a friend who buys Howard's End, and she buys it anytime she goes into a bookstore. She buys a book because she's always giving it away to friends.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine like a first edition or some special version of Howard's End, or maybe one she got from her grandmother. Maybe that would be something that she would be attached to for some reason.
Right.
And a part of her stays with that book.
Understood. I remember growing up in the summers because I like to read a book, for the summer. I would always choose a book, and it was always the same book. I loved Huckleberry Finn, and to this day, and when I had to read it in high school, I said, I don't have to read the book. I'm good.
You know that one inside out, then.
I can recite it, word for word. But it's something even now that I'll go back when when the weather gets hot, because I love to go fishing and stuff. So it's all part of that, And so I will read it to this day, and I still have the same copy I had when I was a kid.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. I love those stories.
So whoever gets that book after I die, good luck.
Yeah,
I'll
no
be
kidding.
There,
Oh man.
So when you started researching all this stuff, did you find any surprises?
I think I wasn't sure what to look for. So here's the thing about haunted bookstores and libraries. Now I've worked in bookstores most of my adult life. I graduated from university in '92 and worked. The last time I worked in a physical bookstore was 2009.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple things that I knew. And I'm a believer, but I'm also a skeptical believer. So when I go in and I research, there has to be something a little bit more than, oh, the books fell off the shelves on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the climate that I live in, it gets really, really humid in the summer. And one thing I know from working in the bookstores is in the summer, especially when you work at a store that's not part of a mall, that's sort of air conditioned and climate controlled better, but you actually have outside access, like a street front shop or whatever, and paperbacks. Paper absorbs water, and when it gets really, really humid, when I was living in Ottawa, working in a bookstore, I would remember the mass market paperbacks would sit there on the shelf, and then they would just kind of expand, and so they would naturally expand in a way that they'd fall off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not enough for me. That books, because gravity still works normally. Books will fall off shelves. Now, books flying off shelves, or in the case of Smith Books, which was a chain store here in Canada, when a staff member went into the back room, the kids section was sort of the back, and then you go through the kids section in the back room, and that's where they do lunch and they receive the books from the shipping dock and stuff. She walked through the kids section. Everything was tidy. There was no one in the kids section. She grabbed something. She came back out, and within a minute, the Goosebumps, and you remember those, they were always very popular books that we sold to younger readers. There was a stack of Goosebumps in the middle of the section, like, a few feet high, and there was nobody there. She walks in the back room, comes back out, and bam, they're there. It's not that they fell and they fell right, into a pile.
Right,
they're right dead center in the middle of the section. So it's kind of like, well, how do you explain that? What was that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's so I'm always looking for the thing that you can't explain through conventional means, like physics and and paper, absorbing humidity and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I'm always intrigued by.
Well, see, you're almost a ghost hunter with that, because when we go out, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the logical stuff. Before we're going to say it's paranormal,
Yeah.
you're going to look for that logical stuff. And then when there's something you can't explain, then you got something going on.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I mean, in your case, the people you're working with,
Hmm.
it gives you credibility because, yes, you're a believer, but you're not looking. I mean, you're looking at the evidence,
Hmm.
and then you're making a judgment based on what could explain this. And you go, "They could be this, could be this, could be this. This thing here, I don't know."
Right, right, right,
It's a
right.
lot more credible than just believing everything outright, right?
What would you say is the most haunted bookstore in Ottawa
Um, Ottawa.
or
I
anywhere,
didn't.
anywhere in your book? Just
Yeah,
yeah.
I think and it's no longer a bookstore now, and it's so sad because it was a beautiful. It was the Runnymede Chapters. Chapters was like a Barnes and Noble. It was a big box
Mhm.
store, and it was an old converted theater that had been converted into a bookstore, and they kept the facade of the stage,
Right.
and it was just gorgeous because they still had, like, this big massive gorgeous hall with the ceiling and all of the art on the wall and the like the thing that made it a classic theater. And there was a legend of a little girl who had died backstage when it was a theater, and sometimes staff members would hear the cry
Hmm.
of this young girl, and they couldn't. They thought it'd be a lost kid. They couldn't find the child, and it was just like couldn't find her. But they would hear this crying every once in a while. They would see this little girl walk around a bookshelf, and there would be nobody there when they're going to close the store. And I think it was what's really sad. I think the thing that broke my heart the most writing this book was a lot of the locations I was writing about were no longer bookstores. Now that's turned around in the last couple of years. A lot of independent bookstores have grown, and there's been a lot of new growth in the last couple of years, which has been fantastic. There's been a lot more support, especially for independently owned businesses and bookstores because of the pandemic. But I didn't answer the previous question you asked, but I think one of the things that hurt me and surprised me a little was, wow, this is a cool bookstore. I should go visit. Oh, it's not a bookstore anymore. Like, it was
Right.
what you would call um trying to think of a chain in the US that's like a pharmacy chain. Uh,
Sure. CVS or something. Yeah.
yeah, CVS
Yeah.
or something like that, right?
Right.
So the Shoppers Drug Mart here in Ontario, and that was the thing that hurt me the most was even Haslam's bookstore in Florida, which was one of the oldest used bookstores in the U.S. And the last time I was in St. Pete, Florida, they ended up closing down during the pandemic, and they were among the royal family of the American Booksellers Association. Like, they have legacy that goes back generations for
Hmm.
this gorgeous, gorgeous store, and of course, the ghost of Jack Kerouac, right, writer who died,
Right.
moved to Florida and died young actually,
Hmm.
but they would often see his ghost. And when I went there, I remember after writing the book, talking to one of the cashiers, and I said, "Hey, you've got copies of Tomes of Terror, one of my books, on the shelf," because Haslam's, I think, is one of the first chapters in the book. And I said, "Hey, I'm the author. Is it okay if I sign them?" And she goes, "Oh, that'd be awesome." So she comes around, and then while I'm signing the book, she goes, "Yeah, I saw Jack last week." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, come on, I'll show you where I saw him." And she took me around the store, and it was I love that sort of experience.
Absolutely. Now, when you think about this, when you go in, do you think you're that they're more apt to talk to you because you are into this and you are writing about this? Because I've gone into places, and I'm not saying bookstores per se, but like certain hotels up in the Gold Country where they keep a running list for us, and we walk in and it's on little papers, it's on napkins, it's on
Oh,
whatever
I
they
love
have
that.
on hand at the
Oh,
time, and they just shove a big pile of stuff at me.
oh, I love that. No, you know what? I get all of them. Sometimes, especially in a place like that where I've written about their location.
Hmm.
I know when I wrote Haunted Hamilton after the book came out, I brought a copy to the owner of the bar of a haunted bar in Hamilton, and she was pretty excited about it. And of course, for the years, because I ended up haunting the place myself, because I ended up moving around the corner and spent a lot of time there. Um, she would often mention, Mark's written about this place, about the ghost of the winking judge. And so you get those where people go, "Oh yeah, Mark does this," we're going to share some stuff with them, and then you actually get the other ones who just kind of look at you like you have three heads, don't want to share. There have been times where they're like, and sometimes they just don't want to talk about it, which kind of like makes me even more curious. Like, what
Right.
don't you want to talk about?
Right. What about libraries? Now I know there's like there's some famous photos that circulate around, even in the United States, about where they're getting these apparitions in libraries. How's the activity in libraries where you're at?
Um, well, actually, one of the ones not far from here. So I'm in Waterloo, Ontario. So if you think of Toronto, Ontario, north of New York,
Mhm.
I'm about an hour and a bit northwest, and not too far from here in Dundas, which is near Hamilton. There was an old building, beautiful location of the Hamilton Public Library, and I had written about it. And one of the most fascinating things was the elevator was haunted. And one of the reasons that they thought the elevator was haunted was because they had uncovered some tombstones of the founders of the town, and they'd found them when they were doing like construction and building some stuff. And then the library ended up putting them on display right near the just two no, a basement and two stories. And on one of the tombstones, the woman's name is spelled incorrectly too. So that's another potential thing. And what would happen is the elevator had constantly been checked and investigated, and repair people would come in. The elevators would go up and down on their own completely.
Wow.
So it was kind of fun. Like Halloween, I often go and do events at libraries and bookstores and stuff like that, because that's the time people mostly want to hear the things you and I love to hear every day.
Right.
But I was there, and they closed the library. It was a special event. I was going to share some ghost stories, and I'll do some true ghost stories, and then I'll do some fake ones too, just to turn the lights down low, and I'm going to try and get everyone scared and stuff. You do the jump scare stuff with them and everything too, right? Just to get them in the mood for Halloween.
Mhm.
So we're upstairs. They closed, so people who had registered to come all came in, and they're like families. Again, I'm not being too scary because there's younger people there. And we're upstairs in the kids section up on the second floor. The library is closed. The doors are locked. All the staff are upstairs, and I'm there. And we're having a good time, and we're talking and sharing. And the staff are talking about, how, when they were working and they got stuck in the elevator because the elevator was just going up and down and the doors wouldn't open and stuff like that. So they'd shared a few stories. So there we are, all just around the corner in the library. And we were talking about one of the staff members was sharing one of her experiences on a Sunday afternoon when there was no one else in the building but her and a colleague, and they were both at the desk, and the elevator came down on its own, doors open, and there's nobody inside. As we're standing there talking, you hear the ding of the library as it ascended from and opened, and it was just a perfect timing. Scared everyone. And I remember the staff member who was standing there. Die Hard. This is the time of year that people are talking about. Die Hard, the Christmas movie.
Right.
In the scene where you see the faces of the people who are there when John sends down the dead terrorist in the Santa outfit,
Right.
and you see them. You hear the ding, and then you see the eyes open up wide. I saw the one staff member as I saw the ding, because she heard the ding turned and the doors open. So she was one of the only people who could see the elevator. It was like one of those moments. I was like, oh my God, I was here when it happened. That was unique.
Wild. That's wild. What story really strikes you the most, or what that you've looked at? What story strikes you the most as maybe being the most active?
I think, Jack Kerouac's ghost in Haslam's bookstore was interesting because I worked in bookstores, and one of the things that Kerouac would do is he would get in fights with the manager, and he would take his books. And so you come into a bookstore and you see, like, the books behind me, they're all spined, and you usually only do a facing when you have 4 or 5 of a book, stuff like that. Sometimes you'd get an author who'd come in and take their book and face it on the top shelf in front of 3 other books out of alphabetical order because they just wanted their book to be visible.
Absolutely.
And that's frustrating because as a bookseller, you're going alphabetical order. You see the computer system, you have one, but you can't find it because it's been moved somewhere. That's really frustrating. It happened to me thousands of times in my career. But we would get authors who would come in and do that. They go, well, my book's down on the lower shelf because of alphabetical order, and then they would take them and put them up top.
Sure.
And that's annoying. Kerouac used to do that all the time. And so after he died, the staff claimed that the books were moving themselves the way he used to come in and move the books. And every once in a while they would see him just like dashing around the corner as if he'd just moved some books and it was just taken off. And so that was the most fascinating one. Actually, there's so many of them. One of the other ones is the Willard Library in Illinois. And that's the one where they actually have the 24-hour ghost cam, where you can go live on their website. And again, it's the basement, the kids section that's the most haunted, and you live, and they have a way you can take a screenshot, and then you can like circle, hey, look what is this? And people share them all the time. I love the fact that anyone can be, I'm a safe investigator from here in Waterloo, Ontario. I can investigate the ghosts without having to be brave enough to be in the library after hours.
What do you think is in the Willard Library, in your opinion?
I think there's a story of a custodian, I believe, when it was a larger building. I think it was the custodian who had died in the building, and some people believe it's a custodian, but there are people who see specters of a female ghost. And I honestly, sorry, because I've written this book so long ago, trying to remember who they believe the woman in white was.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting. I just, I guess maybe when you pass away and you're so into books, that's your island. That's where you want to be. You want to be in a place where you can have access to all these books. Can you tell us some stories about your area? The different bookstores and libraries and stuff.
Unfortunately, in my area, in the general vicinity, there aren't any haunted libraries or bookstores, but I can tell you one. So I travel a lot as a writer. I go and I teach a lot of workshops and stuff like that. And this is going to take you to your time zone, but it's in Lincoln City, Oregon.
Okay.
And I was there for a writer's workshop, and we were sitting around at night one night, and after the workshops were over, we were all kind of like drinking and chatting and stuff. And I remember one of the writers said, "Oh, you've written a book about haunted," or no, I was working on Tomes of Terror, because this ended up getting into the book. And she goes, "Oh my God, you got to talk to so-and-so. She's the owner of Bob's Beach Books." And Lincoln City's a town of maybe 7,000 people. It's a 3-hour drive from Portland. It's right on the coast. And then of course in the summer it's like 20,000 people, because it's obviously a touristy place. And Bob's Beach Books is this beautiful building right on the main drag in downtown Lincoln City. And it's just a small shop with you come in, the desk is right at the front, and you go in and there's some shelves here. You go up a couple steps, and then you've got just a few, like you can go over that way a little bit and go and hide behind some shelves this way, and there's some other shelves that way. And so there's only one way in and out of the bookstore, and that's right by the desk, right by the front door. And anyways, I was told about, you got to go talk to the manager. So the next day during the lunch break, I rushed into my rental car and I drove down and I went and talked to the manager. And sure enough, she relayed this story to me. So she's working, and this lovely older couple. They kind of look like they may be retired professors from some college somewhere. Just the way that they're dressed and their mannerisms and stuff. They come in and they walk in, and she says, "Can I help you?" She goes, No, we're good." And so they're looking around the store, and they're just searching. And it's not like they're searching for a book. They seem to be searching for something else. And she's, minding her own business, doing inventory, stuff like that. And then after a while, she's like, "Okay, they've been here for a while." She goes over and says, "Can I help you find something? Like, is there a book?" They said, "Well, we're not looking for a book. We're looking for the portal." And she said, "What?" They said, "We're looking for the portal to Lemuria." And it's like a place like Atlantis that allegedly exists. And they said that their documents, the research that they had done, had pointed them to this location, and that this portal to that land out in the Pacific somewhere was here. And she's not sure what to do. She's like, well, okay, good luck. I'll be over here if you need me. She goes back to the desk. She can kind of hear them talking in the back and wandering around in the back. And then at some point she realizes it's silent and she can't hear anything. And for the life of her, she has no idea how if they got out of the store, like if there was a logical reason, how they could have gotten past her without her seeing them. But they disappeared and she never saw them again. And so she wondered, did they find it? And is the portal somewhere in that store? So that one fascinated me because it was one of those ones I had no idea. And again, it's not a ghost story. It's a paranormal, unexplainable, like what was that thing? But hey, a library or a bookstore being a portal to another world, of course, that makes sense.
Why not? Kind of like Narnia, just open the door, out you go.
Exactly.
I was just thinking, I'm a big fan of the book The Ghost of Flight 401 with by John G. Fuller. He tells a story of going on an author's retreat. I think it was like up in the Catskills or someplace, and they were staying in these little cottages, and this had been used for years, hundreds of years by different authors. And I forget who he happened to be in one, and I forget who the poet was. It was a famous poet. And they decided to have a Ouija board session.
Oh no.
In this room. And so they're having this session, and allegedly, I'm saying allegedly now, they contacted her. And what freaked him out was after having this short conversation with her, they said, "Well, can we see you?" And the response came across, "Yes, if you blow out the lights."
Oh no.
And they looked at each other and went, "Blow out the lights." And then it dawned on them. And then they're like, "No, let's turn everything back on. We're done." No. But, when you tell me these stories, that's what it reminds me of. These authors are just hanging around because that's their thing.
Yeah.
That's where they're the happiest.
Oh,
and
man.
And like you say in the last story, why not a portal? I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you do a book or you're writing a book about this stuff, how do you go about getting the information and putting it all together?
So books, newspaper articles, magazine articles, folks like yourself who've done research, checking out if they have a blog and they're sharing, and usually if I could try to contact them to see if I can interview them and get some more details. Maybe oftentimes they've done like investigations that maybe they haven't written about.
Right.
So, and then, the other thing I do is on my website, I'll post a form that people can go and say, I'm looking for stories about hospitals, or I'm looking for stories about this area, and ask people to share what kind of story. Is it something that happened to them? Is it something that happened to someone that they know? Is it something they've heard of and they're just trying to, send a tip? And then I even ask things like, you put your name, and now can I use your name, first name, full name? Do you want me to anonymize you in the story, protect your innocence? Can I email you? Can I call you? Because oftentimes when people share a story like that, I find they don't give me enough. They share one or two lines. Hey, I was in a bookstore and it was haunted and I saw this weird thing and it was scary. And you go, well, that's not a chapter. I need to potentially get some more questions. Well, what time of day was it? What was it? Yeah, was it an adult ghost, a child ghost, a male, a female? Did you hear anything? What was just asking? So sometimes talking through some of that helps me flesh out the story. And then, ironically, many of the stories come when I'm at book signings, because when I'm there, and I have a life-size skeleton. Actually, I should have brought Barnaby in from the car. He's in the car. But Barnaby Bones is a life-size skeletal companion, and often I just keep him in the car now because when I do a book event or whatever, he's there. I just bring him in with me, and I'm usually sitting there at a bookstore with Barnaby. And the reason I do this is kind of twofold. I started off with York and some skulls that were put on the table. It's bigger. A little bit more fun. And he does one of two things. If people are into, if they're into spooky stuff and ghost stories, they see it there because they know what I'm all about, and that's my jam, right? Let's check this out.
Right.
Cool, awesome. I'm here. Let's do it. People who aren't into that are going to avoid making eye contact with the crazy bald man sitting with a skeleton. And so it tells them, not your cup of tea. Walk in the other direction. Don't make eye contact with this guy. So it kind of attracts the right people. But one of the things that happens is when I do talks at libraries and stuff like that, or book signings, oftentimes someone will linger around till the end of the talk and go, listen, can I share something with you? I'm kind of embarrassed, but I've had this weird experience I can't explain. And I'm like, ooh, and I get out my notepad. Can I write this down? And it'll happen at book events, or I'll say, here's my email. We should like maybe go for a coffee, or maybe you can email, or we can have a conversation. So I'd like to, record it so I have better information than my very poor memory. But a lot of the stories end up coming from those events, and it's always like a little creepy, a little weird, but also the other thing too is I'm not judging people when they share the story. Like they feel they can share it with somebody who's going to believe them. Not like sometimes they'll tell it to a friend, and the friend like, oh, you're drunk, what's wrong with you, like you're something wrong with you. And I'm not gonna judge them. And then sometimes they'll share a story, and I'll go, "Oh my God, can I use?" It's like, no, you can't use that anywhere. Are you sure? I'd love to be able to use it. Here's my email address if you ever change your mind. So that's also that's actually probably one of the most fun ways I get my stories.
Cool. Here's a question. Have you had any, these bookstores that you talk to and whatnot? Have you had anybody that liked the stories, that liked the stuff that was going on to the point that they embraced it in their bookstore, and kind of played off of it?
I'm trying to remember. There was one, and I think it was in Canada. It might have been in Alberta, and it was a bookstore where they actually would light a cigar and put a glass of scotch for the ghost because they knew the ghost liked it. And it was just sort of it was kind of like, we're just going to live with it, and this will appease the ghost. And they I think they named I think they based on the name of the person they believed it was, because it was an old converted house.
Yeah.
Have I seen people who've embraced it other than just sort of accepting that? In a lot of cases, and not necessarily with bookstores or libraries, but in a lot of cases, I know there's a haunted theater in Sudbury, Ontario, about 6 hours north of where I am now, where Sidney Brown was an actor. He just wanted to be an actor his entire life. He retired. He started getting more involved in the theater. Unfortunately, he died before they got to opening night. It was a big thing for him to be in this Sudbury Theater Center performance. And they would see Sidney for years, wandering around backstage. They would hear the footsteps, stuff like that. So they developed a ritual that anyone who works at the theater says hello to Sidney when they arrive, and they say goodbye to Sidney when they leave. And it's like this beautiful acknowledgement of someone they respected and worked with for years. And even people who don't know Sidney and had never been there, it's this tradition and this ritual. It's kind of like, you don't say Macbeth in a theater, you say that Scottish play. It's like, and it's one of the things I love about theater people is they're very much into ritual and tradition. And there's something really special about that acknowledgement when you acknowledge, it's like, yes, I know you're here, and I'm saying hello to you. And it becomes beautiful rather than scary.
Mhm, mhm. The reason why I asked is because you reminded me with your skeleton that you take around with you. That bookstore up in Placerville, they have like a basement area, which is normal for old buildings because they're built, on top of
Yeah.
each other. And it's right in the middle of the bookstore, and they have it sealed off with glass. But when you walk over there, they've got a skeleton in there.
Oh, really?
For fun, yeah. So that's why when you said that, I thought,
My
oh,
kind
that's
of bookstore.
yeah. I mean, it's really cool because it used to be called. I don't know what it's called now. It was called Hidden Passages, is what the bookstore was. And
Oh, that's
you
cool.
walk in there, there's this dead dude underneath, right where you can see
Yeah.
it, and the chairs are around there, so you can look down on him, and whatever.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
what's one of the scariest stories that you come across, or are there any?
One of the one of the scariest stories was a haunted hospital.
Okay,
If it's okay if I share a hospital story,
absolutely.
but I was living in Hamilton at the time, had an apartment, above the haunted bar, Winking Judge, and it was like a midnight to 3 in the morning kind of radio program, and I was talking. I think I was probably talking about the research for Tomes of Terror. I'd only had two previous books out at that point.
Hmm.
I remember my girlfriend was she's out for the night, right? She's got to get up for work in the morning, and so she's sleeping in the other room, and I'm sitting in the living room where I wrote and my computer desk and stuff like that. I remember I only had the one desk light, and I'm doing this talk, and at the last half of the show was live call-in, where people could share their own stories,
Sure.
and the host and I would comment on them. And this one gentleman called in to talk about an experience he had at an asylum that he had worked at in Alberta, on Canada, and Ponoka Institute. And he had shared a story about this woman who had pretty much lived in that asylum her entire life, and they believe she might have been possessed, because every once in a while, like, she would attack, and she could throw people across the room. She would bite. They would often have to subdue her with medication and needles and stuff like that, just to get her to sleep. And weird things would happen, like she would complain about the room she was in being ice cold, and you would walk in, it would be like a meat locker, and everything was working. The heater in the room was working, everything. And then they'd move her to another room. The room she was in would go back to normal temperature, and then the new room she moved into was ice cold. But the freakiest thing was, this gentleman was sharing this story, and I remember being so terrified, because there I am with the phone in my hand, listening to this story in the dark, practically all the dark around me, and just feeling the goosebumps. But he was working there one night, and he was doing the rounds, and he went into her room to check on her, because I just want to check, make sure that they're not hurting themselves and stuff like that. And he walked in the room. He said, "Okay," and she was sleeping, but she was standing, sleeping. She was standing with her feet on the wall, about 3 feet off the floor, vertical, like horizontal into the room. Her hair was hanging down over her face, and she was just levitating there, like as if she was standing on the wall in her sleep. And he was so freaked out that he backed out of the room, closed the door. He didn't know what to say. He went back to the TV room where some of the other attendants were there, and didn't say a word to anyone until he shared it on this radio program. I got a hold of the producers of this program afterwards, because I wanted to talk to him, because I knew I was going to be doing a haunted hospitals book.
Right.
And they gave me, he had said it was okay when he called in to give his contact. And so I got a hold of his phone number. I reached out to him. About a week and a half later, I got a hold of him. And he said after he had shared that story, someone else who had worked around the same time as him at the same institute recognized his voice, knew like it was the place. He didn't give his name or anything, and said they went out for coffee and shared the story that he saw something very similar in her room, except when he walked in the room, she was standing, facing him, with her eyes open and levitating about a foot off the floor. And again, hadn't told anyone until after he heard it on this radio program. And it worked out really well to put that in the book, because it was just around the right timing. But every time I think about that, I get chills just thinking about what it would be like to walk in to a room of a woman you suspect there's probably something weird going on.
Right.
And what do you do? Like, if she'd fallen out of bed or whatever, you would help her get back into the bed. Like, that's a normal thing to do. But she's standing on the wall, or she's levitating in the middle of the room. You're like, I'm just gonna step outside. Right?
Do you
that
know
was
what
kind
happened to her after her stay, or
of.
did she pass
I
away?
He doesn't know because he after he left and retired, he didn't he'd never heard. She eventually passed away, I believe, but there was nothing, just the usual weird stuff that would happen. But those are the two really freaky incidents that the two of them bonded over.
Now, you talked earlier about bringing home an unknown, friend with a book that you purchased. Have you had any other incidents like that?
Um, no, but I am currently researching. I am researching a haunted objects book. So, and again, not just necessarily books, but there are books. There was one I'm trying, and I can't remember. This was in the U.S. and there was one about a haunted book that, and it just kept reappearing. It wasn't that there was a ghost attached to it, but the
Mhm.
book was kind of like, the woman put it in her bag and thought she took it with her, and it wasn't there, and they found it back in the room. It was almost like it wanted to go back to the room all the time, and they
Mhm.
couldn't leave the room. And I think it was like a bed and breakfast that had like books in it. So it wasn't necessarily a bookstore, but
Right.
that's one
So,
I'm gonna have to dig into for the next book.
what do you think is the draw for people to like have a bookstore or have a library, and then other people that know about ghosts, and they get drawn into it? What do you think that draw is?
I honestly think the draw is the power of what a book can do for a person.
Sure.
So imagine being a spirit who's trapped. Imagine being a spirit who's wandering, who's looking for some purpose or trying to grab. A book is something that you can cling to, like we cling to as humans. We cling to as people. I can imagine, why would it be any different for a spirit not to want to cling to a book or a location? I,
Hmm.
I do remember reading about a librarian. I think this was in Canada as well. I think it might have been in Ontario. Again, with all the stories, you kind of lose track of where
Sure.
what was where. And this was a retired librarian who kept returning to work because she loved her job so much. She loved books so much. It's after she passed away, they would occasionally see her walking through the library. And again, it was just, it's, there's Doris. It's just Doris loved this place. Books for her life. So why wouldn't she stay
Hmm.
afterwards? And again, I don't think people were scared. It was more of a comfort to go, yeah, Doris is still with us. Now, we don't have to pay her. It's not like she's going to be able to shelve books or anything, but,
Help us out a
she's
little
still
bit.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. That you just brought up another thing that I was thinking about. A lot of the stories you hear about libraries and about bookstores, you never hear really anything really negative about the ghosts that are there. Or have
Rarely.
you come across things?
I mean, the only one is like, the crying, the little girl crying and stuff like that. But no, it's not. Yeah. What is it about those stories that are maybe more touching or more intriguing? Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of. I haven't heard of any violent incidents
Hmm.
where people are injured at bookstores or libraries. So that's
Hmm.
yeah. I'm thinking about some of the library stories, or the old gentleman that looks like he's reading, and then the minute like you make a noise or whatever, or cough or say excuse
Right.
me sir or whatever, the minute he raises his head and looks at anyone, he disappears.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that's not, I mean, it's creepy, but it's not like he beams like red,
Right. Right.
evil, evil red eyes
Right.
and says,
Well,
"I'm going to get you," or anything like that. It's,
that's
it's
what I
usually
was
just
thinking. I mean,
eerie.
if you're gonna check out a haunting, kids, do it in the bookstore or library. Because it's not
Oh
going to
my
be
God, they're
embarrassing.
safer. Yes.
And think of it this way: even when we're alive, if we're sitting there at Barnes and Noble or something, and we're sitting there reading books, and somebody walks up to you and says, "Can I help you?" Da, 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 you're just like, "Go away, I'm reading." So I mean, it makes more sense that you're going to look up and go later.
Yeah, I'm done now. Yeah, I was enjoying myself until you interrupted me.
So when you were working on your book, I mean, how many book stories did you insert in the book, and how many did you actually have?
I think for any of the books, like in this particular one, I'm just going back to look at the table of
Sure.
contents. I'm like, I don't know. There's probably about maybe 100 stories, maybe 120 stories, but there's probably another 30 or 40 that I'd heard,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't able to get enough information to write a chapter on. And that's always frustrating because you're like, oh, this is neat, but this is like one line or one paragraph. And
Mm-hmm.
how do I do that? And that's a frustration with all of the books that I write. I hear a story, but I can't, I can't unless I potentially try to build it into a longer chapter. I'm like, here are some anecdotes about books that are haunted, and there's like a line here and a line there and a line, but that kind of gets, I mean, like I said, when we first started talking,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something fascinating about the storytelling aspect of sharing a ghost story. It's not just, hey, this thing happened and I saw something freaky. You
Mm-hmm.
want a little bit of the backstory. You want to build up some suspense, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to share a little bit of, again, maybe because I've been a writer my whole life. You want a
Sure.
little bit of a story arc. You don't want to just go bam. You want to ease them into it. And it's like, sit down. I'll get a nice cup of cocoa here. I'll get you a nice book you can read. That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Have you ever run into any? And I know, like this thing I was talking about in Placerville, where some of the activity in there is related to like authors or people that had the books before, but it's also related to, well, you were talking about that theater, for instance, the one that was built over the theater. The
Yeah.
stories that are related to, say, the building that was there before.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. It was a library somewhere in the U.S. that had been built over a graveyard,
Okay.
and I believe that that was a case where, yeah. So it's like a house that was converted or over built over a graveyard. And again, it wasn't anything malicious about the ghosts. They were just the
Hmm.
ghosts were there because of the location, and now it's a bookstore. So it wasn't that the ghosts were drawn to the books. It's that it was just that was the means. And I think there was at least one or two like that. Some of the ones where I think they were and you get this sometimes with libraries where it's a beautiful old house that gets converted,
Hmm.
and it would have been potentially the original owners of the house who potentially still live there or still live on there in different ways.
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm working on the demonic dolls, screaming skulls, and other haunted objects. That's the title of the book. So I'm doing research on haunted objects and things that carry potentially ghosts with them. I'm also working on a weird Waterloo. So I live in Waterloo, Ontario, and I have a local co-author for that one, and we're just looking for ghost stories about the region
Hmm.
here. And then, of course, I got my fiction, and I have a Canadian werewolf series of fiction titles, and so I've got then the very next book coming out is Hex in the City, which is it's going to be the sixth book in that series coming out in March. So I'm always fingers on keyboard, ear
Absolutely.
ear to the wall, wondering where if I'm going to hear something strange.
To give people an idea, because like in the beginning I was talking about, California is young compared to a lot of places. How
Yeah.
far back does the history go in Canada and the different areas?
Actually, Canada goes back only about as far as the U.S. Maybe
Okay.
a little bit. We're a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
Only goes back a few hundred years in terms of white people coming in and
Sure.
but yeah, and again, when you go to the East Coast, right? When you're in New York, when you're in Florida, when you're in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland in Canada, you get a lot more history because people have been there longer because we kind of had to work our way
Mm-hmm.
across. That being said, I mean, we do have indigenous ghosts and legends as well that go back thousands of years, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where legends of a Wendigo and stuff like that. And I still think that's kind of part of Canadian folklore and Canadian legends and Canadian not paranormal or supernatural or things that we maybe wouldn't explain with science.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mark, I want to thank you for coming on. I would love to have you on again to talk about haunted hospitals and your other books.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. It was
Yes.
always fun to chat.
You make me want to finish my book because I've always been in the process of writing a book and I never finish it. But your enthusiasm makes me want to jump back in and do it.
Hey,
Wow.
button chair, fingers on keyboard.
There you go. But yeah, I would love to have you back on again. It's an open invitation.
Oh, thank you so much. I will love to return.
And how can people find you?
You can search Mark Leslie on any online bookstore. I'm at markleslie.ca if you're looking to find links to the various books I've written.
Last question. I asked this to everybody. You're standing on the strip in Las Vegas, and there's other authors that have written books similar to yours.
Yes.
How do you get them to read your book?
How do I get other authors to read my book?
How do you get people passing by?
Oh, just people.
Yeah.
I usually would want to find a person who likes the kind of thing I write.
Uh-huh.
And I'm the kind of person who would just, if I had a copy, I would just give it to them to try and make their day. Like, hey, can I sign this for you? And slip it over. I mean, what I really want the person who would really love and enjoy the book. That's the person that I want to pick up the book, not someone who's going to read it because they feel sorry for me, or they it was like, oh my God, he keeps nagging me, I guess I'll read his book. I'd rather they read it and go, wow, I had a really fun time with that, because that's I wrote it for fun. I wrote for fun. I wrote it but it was. I mean, if it's not something I'm interested in, I'm not going to spend all those hours working on it. So I want the people reading the book to have as much fun as I had writing it.
Okay, fantastic. Again, thank you very much. I hope you have a great holiday.
Thanks, you
And
too.
I will definitely be back in touch with you. Definitely.
Excellent.
All
I
right,
look
so
forward
have
to
a
it.
good evening. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that was really fun. That was really interesting. I mean, I've experienced haunted bookstores and libraries in the past too, and hospitals. I mean, when my mother was over at Kaiser North, and she was in what they call the Camellia section, and they found out what I did in my spare time. The nurses had all kinds of stories about ghosts and stuff over in that section. So maybe the next time we have him on, we'll be talking haunted hospitals, right? All right, tomorrow we're shifting gears. Richard Martini is going to be with us. I've been trying to get Richard on the show for a long time. And if you remember, we had a guest on some time back who channeled the Divine Council for us. It was a really cool interview. Anyway, he has information also about the Divine Council, so we're going to be talking about that. In addition, he's worked with psychics who have channeled celebrities. So we're going to get information on people like Elvis and Marilyn and a few others tomorrow. So it should be an interesting show. But please note, that one's going to be at 4 p.m. Pacific. So we're going on 2.5 hours. We're going, 2.5 hours earlier tomorrow. So that's going to be an early show. All right. So it's going to be from 4 to 5. So just, put that in your data banks and put that in your data banks and smoke it. No. Just put that in your data banks. But I'm glad you guys came. I'm glad everything went well with the internet because it was a big news day, and you know how it gets sometimes with this internet here. But I want to thank you all for coming. If you're watching from Facebook, you like the show, please hit that follow button, and be sure to hit the like button as well. If you're watching from YouTube, please hit that little ghost in the bottom right hand corner and hit that subscription button. We've got all kinds of shows, and I think you'll find something interesting that appeals to you. I'm a journalist. I don't like to stay on the same ghostly topics. I like to do other things as well. So you're going to find stuff on spousal abuse and stories like that, stories that mean something, stuff on the opioid crisis over there, and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, get over our YouTube site and check it out. Okay. Anyway, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. We're just trying to get the word out about this show. We're like, we are like the little show that could. Numbers are rising, boom, 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 and the more you share, the more people watch us. Even if it's someone you hate, share it with your little brother. It might be 2 years old. That's fine. I'm cool with it. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I know everybody's busy. The holidays fast upon us, and yeah, it's a very busy time for people. If you guys want to send me a cake, I'm good. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I will give you his information and his books, and you can check them out on your you can check them out at your own pace and all that good stuff. So here we go. I'm closing out, and oh yeah, special event. I forgot. Friday evening, we've added another show, and that's going to be at 8:30 p.m. Pacific. And we are going to be doing a live Christmas light tour. There's an area here in Sacramento called the Fabulous 40s. And in this area, this area was built before the Great Depression. And at that point, these houses were considered mansions back in the old days. And so they're very well kept up now. And the whole area really, really goes all out. So we're going to be doing a tour of that, and we're going to be out live. So be sure to check that out on Friday night. That'll be after our regular show with Nancy Matz. Okay. Anyway, so here we go. I'm going to close the show off, and here we go. His website is markleslie.ca. And we got books. We got Haunted Hamilton, Haunted Hospitals, I Death, and Spooky Sudbury. You got Tomes of Terror, and Macabre Montreal. And those are available at Amazon, or check out his website. Alrighty, I'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific. Have a great evening, you guys.